Nathan has the runner. Daisy Pearce in space inside 50. If Bannon just kicks the ball, she backs her pace in, takes 2 bounces, runs to 30. This will be a wonderful goal. Coast to coast footy from the D's.
Kickers have got nothing to go to. Blackburn through Bilardo generates the kick. Who else? Benelli May.
They have another chance for them to go forward. Guest kicks it to Truce and up. Oh, wide. Molly McKenzie with a hanger.
Zagetti again. Strong Zagetti.
Oh, great body work from Lachlan. Chance out the back on her left boot. Brilliant. Celebrates with the fans on the hill.
And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I'm your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFLW round review. We've done it. 10 rounds come, 10 rounds gone. We are on the precipice of finals, so we got to talk the last round and get ready to talk everything AFLW finals. And joining me from Chile Cork in Ireland, Mr. Mike Curran. Mike, it's great to see you, sir.
And you too, Donnie. Great to be back having a chat with you. It sure is chilly here, but it's that time of the year, so it's all good. But yeah, how crazy is it that the home and away season is done and dusted and 10 rounds have gone by in what seems like a flash?
Unfortunately, it does. 10 rounds, way too fast. I really was hoping that we could maybe get 12 rounds next year. Unfortunately, the statistics don't look like they're going to go our way, but at last we get women's footy. So let's jump into it. Before we get into the nuts and bolts, break each game down, just an overall kind of sky view from you, Mike, on what you thought of round 10 and how crazy a round it was, going all the way down to the final siren of the final game.
Yeah, it sure was crazy, and I'm sure it's mainly a product of that short season that you just mentioned. But like, if you think about it, heading into round 10 at the weekend, 13 of the 18 teams were still in contention for finals, and there was so many permutations depending on who won what game, and there was teams watching other results, and yeah, it had all the excitement you needed for a final round. Heading into a final series, we had great games, we had some surprise results, we had some big goodbyes and retirements as well, of course, from a lot of clubs as it was coming to the last game of the season for them. And yeah, some tense moments for a lot of teams, but the top 8 have taken shape.
Definitely, for sure. So let's jump into it. We'll go through each of the games real quickly, and then, as per usual, break down and then get ready for finals. Game 1, Friday night footy. So the Gold Coast Suns, with a little bit of a stunner, knocking off the Essendon Bombers 39-25. And it's almost perfect that I have you on, Mike, because Niamh McLaughlin up in the Gold Coast Suns put on a show in this game, including an old-fashioned Irish solo. I had to chuckle at that more Irish players are rocking the solo sometimes in footy games now.
Yeah, well, we've seen 2 of them in a couple of weeks now. Aileen Gilroy did it 2 weeks ago for Hawthorn, but Niamh McLaughlin had another solo, as we call it here. But yeah, it was quite funny to watch, a unique bit of skill that comes from the Gaelic football here in Ireland. But as Niamh kicked that ball to herself, you could see the director panned out, expecting a big kick down the ground, and they had to zoom back in again because she literally flicked it back up to herself. But got a couple of bounces in it as well. Yeah, but fantastic game for Niamh, and she's had a great season, particularly in the second part of the season when she's moved up to the forwards. But yeah, this is massive for the Suns. Both teams headed into this game with the potential to secure final spots. As I mentioned already, multiple permutations around the results and which team won and so ever, but it was Suns who cemented their own fate with a 14-point win to secure 5th spot, so that's a great finish for them. And obviously the Bombers had to rely on other results, but they also made it through in 7th position into a coveted final spot, and a big achievement for them in just their second season as well, of course, an expansion team from last year. But yeah, great excitement for the Suns, first time back in the finals in 3 seasons for them.
Yeah, definitely be fun. Both these teams have a ton of talent in there. It was a little sad to not see Charlie Rowbottom. Unfortunately, her injury from the previous round kept her out of this, but a heck of an effort by this Gold Coast Suns team, even minus Charlie Rowbottom. A fantastic performance. And it's interesting to see how Essendon responds, because I think they were really coming up there red hot favorites, and the Suns kind of tamed them a little bit. So it'll be interesting how Essendon responds in their first final. We move on to Whitten Oval, and the Western Bulldogs horror season unfortunately finally comes to an end as the North Melbourne Roos beat them quite soundly 46 by 46, 55-9. But maybe it's my high expectations of North, but I was a little disappointed in them because the behinds kicked in this game. Really, if they could kick straight, this could have been a quite an ugly game at the end if they would have found the center sticks instead of the behinds.
Yeah, well, look, it was a 46 points margin as it was. As you say, out of 20 scores, they got 13 behinds. If a few more of those went through for majors, the margin would have been much worse for Western Bulldogs. But look, it's been a pretty miserable season for the Bulldogs, apart from that one shining light of that win in round 9. 9 losses for the season. In this particular game, obviously they're going up against one of the top teams, but they were held scoreless at half time. They'd only scored one behind at 3/4 time, and it was only in the opening minutes of the last quarter before Britt Gutnick scored their only goal, but it still saw them finish on their equal lowest, highest score in an AFLW game. So yeah, it's been a bit of a miserable season for the Bulldogs, and I'm sure they'll have to do a lot of introspective looking at themselves over the season. But yeah, North, big win. They've secured that top 4 finished. They've bounced back from 2 narrow losses to 2 of the top teams, Demons and Crows, in the previous weeks. And look, some of the stars shining for North Melbourne again. Jazzy Garner, Ash Riddell. They've been a magic partnership for the full competition so far, and the same again in round 10. Jasmine Gardner, 31 disposals, 2 goals, 36 disposals for Ash Riddell. But yeah, North have looked incredible all season, and they move the ball quickly, and in this particular game in general through the middle. But as you say, apart from a little bit of inefficiency in scoring, the season the margin could have been much worse. But yeah, they're back where they want to be with a double chance now in the finals.
Definitely, for sure. And then I gotta ask, how much did it make you smile to see Erica O'Shea get her first ever AFLW goal?
Oh, it was incredible. Yeah, of course. Yeah, look, I was personally involved in getting Erica over to Kangaroos last year, and she's been outstanding as a defender. So to see her go up front for a little while, she mentioned they've been doing it in training across the last week, get that first goal. Every single one of the Kangaroos players ran the length of the oval to get around her. She did an interview afterwards. She was quite emotional about it. She was ringing her mom. Her parents were only over the week before for a couple of weeks, so they got to see some games and stuff. But yeah, great excitement. It's always exciting when somebody scores their first AFLW goal. We had Niamh Martin score her first goal in the previous round 8, I think, as well, in her debut season. So it's always a special moment for a player. But I'm pretty sure they'll be keeping Erica back in the half-back line for the final series, because that's where she's absolutely excelling at the moment as well.
Yeah, she's been fantastic up there. I love seeing it. So it made me smile, as was like, I know Mike's gonna have plenty of to talk about when it comes to Ireland. With Ireland, with the solo Niamh McLaughlin and Erica O'Shea getting her first goal in that. So I'm like, plenty of Irish connections in the first couple of games here. But let's go over to Alwyn Oval, where the Port Adelaide Power ended their season with a nice 58-point win over the GWS Giants. And I know everybody will talk about it, and we can't shy away from him. Erin Phillips hanging up the boots in her incredible career, not only in footy, but also in sport in general. But to see her kick her goal late in that game to at least send her off with an absolute peach of a goal was absolutely magnificent. I know there were 2 teams in here. I also have to give a shout out to Matilda Schultz, the young ruckman, who had a fantastic game in this one. But it's hard not to say that this game was all about getting Erin Phillips a little bit of recognition and that goal to end her career. It was magnificent vision to see her get a goal in her final game.
It was the fairy tale ending to an absolutely outstanding and unrivaled career. And as you say, in the last quarter, to take one of her trademark pack marks, kick a goal in her last game, absolutely superb. What the best AFLW player, most decorated, 3 premierships with the Crows, 2 league best and fairest, as you said, numerous achievements outside of that with basketball, Olympic basketball, silver, Commonwealth Games, gold. The list goes on. what a career and what an inspiration Aaron Phillips has been to everybody. So yeah, I definitely think all of the celebration and the ceremony running up to that definitely saw a huge bounce from Port Adelaide, and they definitely gave her a fantastic send off. Another big loss for the Giants, unfortunately, but the power on fire at Alberton Oval, you know, Ashley Saint with 5 goals, Gemma Houghton with 3 goals, as well as Erin getting over for that goal herself. But yeah, great to see one of the all-time greats of the game finish on a high.
Absolutely. So again, I said it online and I say it again. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much for your wonderful career and everything that you've done. I know your time in footy isn't completely done. I wouldn't be shocked if she finds her way into some coaching ways. But again, a magnificent playing career and sporting career all together. She was definitely an impact on that one. So let's go down to GMHBA Stadium down in Geelong as the Cats continue their winning ways, beating the Hawks 60-20, a 40-point win. And again, the Cats continuing making finals again this season. This young team has been fantastic, and I can't not go there. Aisling Maloney, how fantastic has she been for the Cats coming over this year from Ireland?
Yeah, it's been a fantastic season for Geelong, as you said, making their second consecutive final, looking very impressive throughout the year. In fairness, they're absolutely flying it in the forward stakes. In this particular game, you know, they had 7 individual goal kickers. Amongst those was Aisling Maloney, who's having an amazing first season. You know, she came straight over on a short preseason, played from round 1 straight in, played all 10 games, and has really is an exciting player. Is already marking herself out as a tall key forward. She's great early in the air, but for a tall player as well, when the ball hits the ground, she's exciting. She's got some great goals across the season, so a fantastic season for her. And as I say, they have multiple options up front. You know, Chloe Shearer nabbing 3 more goals again at the weekend. She's had a brilliant season. But yeah, Geelong made sure their finals position. They've locked down 8th. A big win over Hawks. It's the first time these sides had ever met, coincidentally. And in fairness, you know, Hawks worked very hard throughout. They also, I suppose, were out of contention. It was their last game of the season. They were sending off a number of players who have retired as well. So we'll see some changes at Hawthorn heading into next season. You had Akesh McCure, Chus, Catherine Brown, Tamara Luke playing, and I think Tegan Cunningham retired during the week as well. So they did their very best to send off all those players. Some brilliant performances from the likes of Emily Bates, who's also had a brilliant season since coming from the Lions. But yeah, it was Geelong better on the night, back in finals, and they'll be hoping to go, I suppose, one better than last year, where they went down narrowly to North Melbourne Kangaroos in the finals. So they'll be happy to have secured that spot.
It'll be fun. Can't wait for that matchup. We'll discuss that a little bit later, but I think a cracking matchup for Geelong in that first round of the finals. We fly out to Mineral Resources Park out in Perth as a less than full strength Crows, as I kind of didn't surprise me that their coaches decided to rest a few players since they knew they were locked into one of the top 2 spots. They were guaranteed at least a first home final. They get the win, not as impressive as many people thought, but you know what? In the long run, Crows get a win, and after a few other performances, end out being minor premiers on the year. But I have to say, this West Coast side, they were scrappy, they were tough, they never gave up in this game, and it was great to see them have a pretty good performance. Though in defeat, I still think they held themselves very well against a very good Crows side, even an underwomaned Crows side.
Yeah, for sure. You said at the start we fly out to Perth. I think most of the Crows didn't fly out to Perth for this round. I think 6 big omissions with managing players and that. But even so, you know, it was still a great game and a great performance by West Coast. It's important to highlight that. Again, as with many of the teams in round 10, a big performance on their last game at home for the season. Obviously, they've lost their head coach a couple of weeks ago, Michael Pryor, and Rowan McHugh has been in charge now for 2 weeks. So lots of players, I suppose, playing and as a group looking towards the future, and a lot of excitement there with a lot of young players coming through and a lot to look forward to for the Eagles if they get the right person to take them forward and realize their potential. But yeah, Adelaide Crows got the job done despite that spirited showing from West Coast Eagles. They are minor premiers, primarily due to another result that we'll talk about in a minute, but that has significance as well in terms of where finals and even grand finals might be played later on this month. But yeah, job done from the Crows. I suppose it showed the strength of their squad in depth, that a number of other players were able to stand up. And when you see the players that have to come back in for finals, it'll be exciting for them as well. But they've had a fantastic season, and they're now gearing up for another finals season and a crack at their 4th premiership. You know, it's incredible. They're the only team to win more than 1 premiership. They've won 3. They really have been one of the top clubs since AFLW started, and they're looking strong heading into this final series as well.
Yeah, they look really good. And like I said, it didn't surprise me that their coaching staff rested a few players. And in fact, I remember even we'll go back to the previous game as seeing 3 Crows players actually at the ground in Alberton watching the Aaron Phillips thing. It was I had to cry. It was Ann Hatchard, Stevie Lee Thompson, and Najwa Allen were all in the crowd watching the Port game. So I had to chuckle at that, but that didn't surprise me. That's good coaching. It's improving. It's getting a game for some of their depth players they may need come finals time. So smart decision in there. But again, for me it was the West Coast. They played as absolutely incredible game that they could against a really good team and did not do themselves any disservice. We jump up to the game that was the reason that the Adelaide Crows became the minor premiers as North Melbourne go up to Brighton Homes Arena up in Ipswich and Springers and falls short to the Brisbane Lions 53-28. An absolutely cracking game of footy. Absolutely loved this. The Lions were up and about this entire game, and they just did not let the D's even breathe for half a second, with at least 3 tacklers trying to tackle any time a D touched the footy.
Yeah, a massive win for the Lions and a massively important one. And this was like the grand final rematch from last season. And I was at that game in Brighton Homes Arena myself. And I know the Lions were hurting after losing that one. It was their first ever match at Brighton Homes Arena. It was a grand final. So they were up to make amends for that. But yeah, you've nailed it there. They've beaten Melbourne. They've had a couple of wobbles along the season, but this really has been their best performance so far, without question. They were absolutely relentless from the start. As you mentioned, pressure on the ball and pressure at the contest was unrivaled. Very interestingly, now they're back in top 4. They have beaten the other top 3 teams, the only one to do so. They've beaten Adelaide, Melbourne, and North Melbourne in the home away season. So that's an incredible record for them and puts them really right back into the conversation. But a really impressive performance. And in terms of picking out players, you could pick out any Lions player on the night. 2 goals each from Dakota Davison and Sophie Conway. Jade Ellinger was brilliant on the wing. Ali Anderson, last season's best and fairest. Orla O'Dwyer, one of our Irish lines. Jennifer Dunn, the other Irish line, who did a tagging role on Eden Zanker, who's like the joint top scorer in the league and kept her scoreless. So yeah, across the ground, Brie Conan, captain, exceptional as well. Absolutely brilliant. So they topped many of the key stats right from the start to the finish. Inside 50s, tackles, disposes, the lot. And of course, like Melbourne were already guaranteed a top 2 spot before the game, but it's brilliant. Brisbane will enjoy this one, and this was the result that made Adelaide the minor premiers. But a brilliant win for the Lions, I suppose, bouncing back from what would have probably been a shock loss to St Kilda in round 9.
Yeah, definitely. That threw a lot of things. So it kind of balances out the top 4. We got the top 4 that I think a lot of people expected, but probably not the way we all kind of thought it would turn out. So it was really, really interesting. So we'll jump to Sunday it was kind of decision Sunday. We went in. There were still 2 spots available going into Sunday. We start off the first one at Icon Park. Carlton with a chance to play spoiler over playing St. Kilda, and St. Kilda get the win, a 20-point win, drawing, if I remember correctly, they were within 1 percentage point of Sydney before the Sydney game started with this 20-point win, 46-26. St. Kilda, Nick Del Santo, little struggles early in the season, but they found their form and kept playing so well as this season went on. Another fantastic game for this. We'll find out their fate, whether they make the finals or not, here in just a little bit as we go on. But at the time that this game ended, as a Saints supporter, you were feeling confident knowing that one upset in any of the other 2 games, and you had a shot to play finals.
Yeah, for definitely. Look, they did all they could. I suppose they did what they had to do. They went out. They had a great winning year over Carlton at Icon Park, and then they had to sweat and watch some other games to see if results went their way. And it was going to come down to percentage. But a great season overall for Saints. They started off losing 4 games in a row, then they won the next 4, and they've ended up with 6 wins overall for the season. So this Carlton were up for the challenge in this game, but the Saints really kind of kicked on from the second quarter. Georgia Patricios was brilliant again on the wing, 25 disposals. Saints, a bit like Brisbane Lions, got big numbers around the ball and forced big pressure on Carlton throughout this game. But as you say, they did what they had to do, got their 20-point win, and it was out of their hands then.
Yeah. And so then we move on to Victoria Park in a game that Collingwood needed to win, and unfortunately the worst possible time to have one of their worst performances, as the Richmond Tigers, the wounded and hurting Richmond Tigers, put 77 on the board in a 52-point win over the Pies, 77-25. And I watched this game going, OMG, the Collingwood did a collie wobbles in the women's. And again, I know they've had some injuries. I know Ruby Slicer was out, Lauren Butler was out, and there's a couple of really key cogs back there. But this was a Richmond Tigers team that they were being held together by duct tape. And for them to get this massive win at the end of the year to kind of give them something positive after a season that kind of just turned into a horrid run at the end of the year made me smile a little bit, not just because I was a Swan supporter, knowing that now it was only the Saints. The Swans knew they win, they're in.
Yeah, well, look at it. It was a massive win for the Tigers. They were out of contention. It was definitely another round 10 bounce. I think, they just gave it one last crack before heading into next season. Collingwood knew they had to win this year to get into the top 8 and possibly with a bit of percentage. Both sides have played finals last season. Richmond knew they weren't going to get back in there. Collingwood kind of had it in their own fate. But yeah, it was the manner of the win that was surprising, I suppose. Tigers definitely pulled out their best performance of the season. They got their highest ever AFLW score. The game was reasonably close in the first half, with Collingwood keeping their noses just in front, but not building any required lead in terms of percentages and anything like that. But it was from there on that Tigers started to dominate some of the big names to the fore. Again, Katie Brennan with 2 goals. Monique Conti was outstanding, 34 disposals. But overall, a thoroughly deserved victory. Tigers had 22 scores to Collingwood's 5, but 7 goals in the final quarter really blew out this margin. And, as I say, probably the surprise result of the round in terms of not only Collingwood losing, but losing by that margin. And that's their season now done and dusted.
Yeah, unfortunately. So we all eyes then shift out to Fremantle Oval as the Sydney Swans took out the Fremantle Dockers, and the Swans, yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Swans, a 0-10 season, get the win, 40-18, a 22-point win, and the Swans, with the margin that they did, were able to edge out St. Kilda and get that final spot in the finals. And I'll talk about it before we really dive into this one. Everybody wants to talk about the controversial call, which, again, as a Swan supporter, I went through all of this last season with the men's, with the Ben Keys kick. Was it a goal? Yes. Should have been called a goal? Yes. Was it? Absolutely, absolutely should have been. It wasn't. Did it cost Fremantle this game? You could say momentum, but the Swans were starting to pick it up. But the one thing I got to say about this entire game was, OMG, these teams beat the living crap out of each other with the tackling pressure that they had through the first 3 quarters. I was like, who is going to survive this? Because there had to be some bruised bodies after this game because they tackled each other into oblivion in those first 3 quarters.
Oh, they did. I watched this game and it was ferocious from start to finish. It was tense. There was nothing in it. It was tight. Sydney knew they needed that win. It was an arm wrestle. There was nothing in it across 3/4 time. A lot of kind of wild footy, unstructured stuff, but like intriguing to watch. And it was just a case of who kind of just took control of the game and became a bit more mature in their play. And as it turned out, it was Swans. And the goal that wasn't that you referred to, yes, it was a pivotal moment, and at that point it might have put Dockers 9 points up, but it definitely didn't cost them the game because, as you mentioned, momentum had started to swing to the Swans at that stage, but from that point they definitely drove on, and then it was 3 late goals in that last quarter to get them over the line. But yeah, what a game to watch, and what an achievement. I know you're enjoying this one, Donnie, as a Swans fan, but it really is incredible given the season they had last year. As you say, winless. to almost start from scratch again. You know, I did a lot of work with Swans early in the year, getting some Irish players over, and they were pretty much disregarding last season because they had to put a squad together at, I think, 6 or 8 weeks notice or something crazy like that.
It was
So
like 10. Yeah, it was
10
nuts.
weeks, yeah. So, you know, what a job Scott Gowans has done, and factoring that he was ill during the year with cancer as well. You know, there's so many sub stories to this achievement. For them to get into finals, it's incredible in their second season, and well earned, and huge celebrations up in Sydney, I'm sure. And they'll be looking forward to having a crack at the finals. But yeah, definitely it was down to the wire on the last game. And of course, this win for Swans was the game that put St Kilda out on 4 percentage points. Incredibly cruel for them, but huge celebrations for the Swans.
I mean, I went through because I had to double look. I heard this 158 tackles in this game. That is actually no, 168, if I could do my math correctly. 168 tackles in this game. That is mental. How crazy this was. I couldn't. I just every single tackle was it was right there. This was such a fun game to watch. I mean, I remember texting several friends going. I was so nervous going into this game because Fremantle is a team that on its day can have a really good matchup. You've got Turbo. I was sad to see Anya Tighe not play because she's had a great season. Unfortunately, injuries kind of caught her at the end of the year, and she was kind of a linchpin for this Fremantle team. So I'm over the moon for this Swans team because it has been it's been a tough 10 games last year, and so many people are like, well, they got McAvoy and they got Chloe Malloy, but for me it was they were additions to a team that really had some progression this year with Ali Morfitt. I know she's been hurt with her wrist injury, but she absolutely was magnificent early in the 7 games that she played during the season. Brianna Tarrant, Nella Heads in the back playing really, really well. As you said, Julie O'Sullivan is gaining absolute legend status in amongst the Swan supporters with her effort plays and her abilities. I know what was it? Paris McCarthy had some great. Tanya Kennedy has become everybody's favorite tagger when it comes to it. So the Irish influence on the Swans has been absolutely magnificent this year. It's going to be so much fun. What they do in the finals doesn't really matter to me. I'm just so stoked for this group because they absolutely played their tails off this year. They deserve to make finals with their improvement this year. It's been so much fun. Red Hat Donnie, I'm sorry, but this I know, and I try to be as neutral as possible when I can, but this was a great game. This was a great game of footy, and Stannett and Philippa Seth, the defense for the Fremantle Dockers was infuriating for the longest part of this game because they played really, really well until the fourth quarter when you could kind of tell the heat and fatigue kind of got to them. They started getting out the back a little bit. Brooke Lachlan kicks a goal. Chloe Malloy gets another one later. But just the smothers, the tackles. This was just an incredibly physical game of footy. It was so much fun to watch. So that is it. 10 games down for each team. Our finals are set 1 through 8. Before we go through and preview the finals and discuss how things are going to go, I have some burning questions for you, Mike. I know you're just as big a women's footy supporter as I am. How good was this season? How magnificent was it? That yes, though a short season, that it came down to the last game and the last final siren before we knew the 8 teams making finals.
Oh, to sum it up, it was a fantastic season, you know, without question, the best to date. And that's what you want to see. You want to see progression. And that was in terms of, you know, the quality of the games, the quality of the teams, the skills on show, the scoring. I think 3 or 4 of the highest cumulative totals in a season have been scored this season, albeit mainly by some of the top teams. It's probably the goals stats are up. It's a lot better game to watch now as a supporter. You know, there's a lot more structure, a lot more free flowing football, a lot more end to end stuff. So yeah, it's been an incredible season. You know, I guess we have our top 8 for the finals. The top 4 are pretty much as you predicted. The gap is starting to close. There is still a gap. The gap is starting to close a little bit with the next bunch of teams. As we mentioned, there was 13 teams in contention for those final 8 spots going into this round. No doubtedly teams will improve again across the off season, and no team went winless. Even down at the bottom of the table, Western Bulldogs got their win, Eagles got a couple of wins. But yeah, it's a pity it's over in terms of the home and away. I know we have an exciting 4 weeks of finals ahead, but it's definitely the best season so far, and exciting to see what the future holds.
Yeah, it'll definitely be for sure. I cannot wait. This is going to be an incredible finals. Whether what happens, I have absolutely no idea, but it is going to be so much fun to watch. We jump to it. We've got 4 games to cover. We've got 4 games to start this upcoming round. So I must ask you, there is some mouth-watering games here. Adelaide v Brisbane at Adelaide. We have North v Melbourne. We have Gold Coast versus Sydney, and we have Essendon v Geelong. What is the one game you are going to sit down with the popcorn and enjoy because you cannot wait to watch these two teams hook horns?
I'm not going to miss any of these games, Danny. That's for sure.
Neither am I, but
No,
what's the one that you have to see?
it's nearly impossible to pick it. I think Adelaide and Brisbane is probably a massive game. Adelaide, the minor premiers. Brisbane are the only team to defeat Adelaide this season. Crows will want to make amends for that and jump straight into a preliminary final. Crows have 6 players coming back now from those strategic omissions this week, and you have the likes of Captain Chelsea Randall, Anne Harchard, Stevie Lee Thompson, all of the players you mentioned that were up at Albert and Oval watching Port Adelaide and Aaron Phillips' final game there. Jess Waterhouse, Zoe Prowse, so many players to come in. They'll have benefit from a week's rest, but at the same time, Brisbane are on the momentum of that massive win over Melbourne. So this is going to be an incredible game at Norwood Oval, and no matter who wins, it's into a preliminary final. Whoever loses this game is still going to be involved without question, and still going to have an impact. But it's going to be exciting to see how that one goes. Equally, I suppose the other qualifying final, it's that old matchup of North Melbourne and Melbourne, last year's preliminary finalists. Melbourne beat North Melbourne a couple of weeks ago by 23 points. North will be looking for revenge there. I was at that preliminary final last season in Icon Park, and it was down to the wire right into the last quarter. I think North Melbourne had 11 inside 50s, just needed a score to get in front. The key thing you thought they were missing that day was some tall players up front. They've remedied that in the off season, and they've got their big talls up front now, like Shearlaw, King, Randall, all these players. So yeah, it's going to be an intriguing battle. The big question, I suppose, in terms of these top 4 for North Melbourne is their record against the other top teams. North have lost 14 out of 16 games against the other top 3, Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne. So they're going to want to write that stat pretty quickly and get a win over one of the top teams. But yeah, they're going to be incredibly exciting, as are the elimination finals. We got to mention them. You mentioned Sydney against Gold Coast. Gold Coast will probably be favourites for that, but Sydney have a shot to nothing. It doesn't matter what happens. Everybody's on a high, and they're quite capable of upsetting any team on any given day. So who's to say that Swans mightn't make it to the next week there as well? And then you've got the last game, Geelong versus Essendon, 2 very similar teams. Geelong probably one of the best defenses in the league, very tight defense. Essendon, one of the best teams when they go forward, inside 50, most efficient up front. And as I mentioned at the top of the piece, Geelong will want to go one better than their finals appearances last year. So yeah, something in every game here, and really intriguing to watch them all.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Now I'm gonna have a little bit of fun here, Mike, because as everybody knows, we had our discussion about how the fact that you have been so intricate in getting many of the Irish players over to the AFLW. So I have to let you have a little bit of a humble brag moment. How proud are you of all of the amazing performances and the amazing abilities of some of the players that you have brought over this year and previous seasons, including some of these magnificent ones, as you said, Erica Shea earlier in the year, Neva McLaughlin, Aisling Maloney, Julia Sullivan, Paris McCarthy. I mean, Neve Kelly, so many of these great Irish players that are going to be, right there in the finals. How proud are you of how they're doing in the AFLW?
Oh, incredibly proud, without question. I think now that you mentioned, I don't get or take much opportunity to reflect on it, especially when it's in season and everything's a bit chaotic and it's all go when we're covering games. And already in terms of recruiting, we're looking to next season, and hopefully we'll see some more Irish players over there. But yeah, every now and again, someone mentions to me like, oh yeah, you were involved in bringing such and such a player over, and I go, oh yeah, actually I was, and they're doing brilliantly. Or we're watching a game here at home, and my kids will go, Dad, you brought a blind Mackin over to Melbourne, and she's won a premiership, and I'm like, yeah. So yeah, it's incredible. some of the players that I brought over last season. Blind Mackin, as I mentioned, premiership in her first year, brilliant on the wing for Melbourne this year. Erica O'Shea turning into one of the top defenders in the league. Orla Lally had a breakout season this year for Fremantle Dockers, you know, absolutely outstanding as well. I brought over Anya McDonald last year to Hawthorn. She's been brilliant for them. She went on an 8-round goal scoring streak this year, scored every round from 1 to 8. That's a record for an Irish player by about 4 rounds, you know, never been done before. Niamh McLaughlin got her to the Suns, and incredible to see her speed and excitement as we knew that's what she'd bring. And even, you know, Jennifer Dunn to the Lions already having an impact. She went to Brisbane off literally a 2-week preseason because her team Dublin won the All-Ireland here, and it took her a few rounds to get into it, but now she's like already shaping up as a key defender for Brisbane and will be in some of these big battles. We mentioned her on Eden's Anchor last weekend. And even down to Yvonne Bonner, you know, helped Yvonne get back to the Crows, and she's had a brilliant season despite missing a couple of games at the end there. She got back and scored this weekend. So yeah, as you mentioned, some of the other players, more potential to play more games next season and get better year on year. But it's a privilege to be involved in helping secure these AFLW opportunities for these players. And, you know, for the players, it's changing their lives, especially now as the new CBA is confirmed, the conditions and rewards continue to improve. But most importantly, I think it's making the game of AFLW better to have these Irish players in it. So yeah, very exciting.
I definitely, from a fan that absolutely loves the game, so many of these Irish players are so much fun to watch. And then, like I said, when we start seeing the Irish solo getting pulled out in the game, I have to always makes me chuckle. Made me chuckle a little bit when I saw Eileen Gilroy to pull that out, and then Neve last week. I was like, yep. I said, I think it's going to start happening a little bit more because it is a little clever tactic. Absolutely love it there. So that is going to do it for my questions. We get to the point of the podcast. I take over just the littlest bit and I do a team of the round. This will be the last team of the round for the year. And then I will wait until after the grand final to premiere my all Australian team, which I do every single season. So here's kind of some of the best performances of this round. In my personal opinion, I kind of do this before. I have a few metrics that I kind of do this. So I'm going to drop this down a little bit and then we'll kind of see what you think here, what you think here, Mike, because I tend to put a little bit more emphasis on goal scoring a little bit. So if sometimes you'll get a few names that might come out of nowhere, but that's kind of explaining that. So we start in the back, considering I coach up here. You always start with defense. So at the fullback line, both played in the final game of the round, and that is Philippa Seth of the Fremantle Dockers and Brianna Tarrant of the Sydney Swans. On the halfback line, sees Daisy Darcy, Erica O'Shea of the North Melbourne Roos, and Danny Verhagen of the Adelaide Crows. On the wings, we see Maddie Newman of the Adelaide Crows and Brisbane Lions Sophie Conway. In the guts in the midfield, we see Jasmine Garner of the North Melbourne Roos, Ebony Marinoff of the Adelaide Crows, and Monique Conti of the Richmond Tigers. At the ruck, she's Matilda Schultz of the Port Adelaide Power. At the half-forward line, she's Zarly Goldsworthy of the GWS Giants, Port Adelaide's Gemma Houghton, and Geelong's Chloe Shear. At the full-forward line, we see Ash Saint of the Port Adelaide Power and Richmond's Katie Brennan. On the bench, I have one from each of the positions, defender, midfielder, ruck, and forward, and then utility from any of the positions. Defender, North Melbourne's Emma Carney, and the midfield, West Coast, Isabella Lewis. On the ruck, Melbourne's Lauren Pierce. At the forward, Sydney's Chloe Malloy. And the utility, Geelong's Nina Morrison, round out my team of the round. I know it's a lot of names. Really quickly, your thoughts of my team of the round for round 10.
Yeah, that's very impressive. It's very hard to argue with anyone of those. All very good across the weekend, you know, and possibly a couple of more players. The likes of Emma Driscoll was brilliant for Fremantle in defence and stuff like that as well. But yeah, look, that's a fantastic team of the round, without question. All of the players, massive contributions to their team, and to finish up the season on a high.
Definitely, for sure. So normally we do power rankings, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to take a break from power rankings because we have we have several games to go and we have the finals to cover. So I know that I got to do this, sir. Have you looked at the bracket and have you had a chance to break it down and see who do you think is going to win the final? Because we're going to tip the entire bracket. I want to know who's going to win your premiership. So we'll start off and go through each round one by one and figure out who's going to win the premiership according to you and according to me. Let's have a little fun with this. We'll start off first one. Adelaide Crows, Brisbane Lions, Norwood Oval in South Australia. Can the Crows maintain home field advantage, or can Brisbane throw a huge curveball into this finals and knock off the Crows on the road?
It's going to be close, but I think the Crows are going to just get over the line here. Now, again, at the preliminary final last year, it was Adelaide versus Lions. It was up in Gold Coast. I was at that game as well, and Lions got over on that occasion. This season, I just think the Crows are seriously impressive. We've seen that Brisbane can beat any team on any given day, and the loser of this game is still going to be involved at the other side of the table as well. But I'm going to go with Adelaide on this one.
All right, I'm going to go Adelaide too, just because Norwood Oval is skinny. It's going to help out the Crows a little bit. The Lions won't have that space to use their speed and athleticism. I think the Crows are absolutely humming. They'll be nice and cherry ripe at home with some of those really good inclusions back from a team that went out west. So I like the Crows in this one too, but I think the Lions make this quite a competitive game. We go to the elimination section of that particular side of the bracket, sees Gold Coast at home, Heritage Bank Stadium, hosting the Sydney Swans. I will tip this one. I'm going to tip Gold Coast in this one only because I worry in this situation that Gold Coast has a few more stars. They're playing really good footy, and there's some dangerous situations. The defensive matchups with Jack Tapai and Tara Bohanna are going to give the Swans headaches. This is the one thing that scares me as a Swan supporter because they really don't have a really tall defender that is also athletic. Alice Mitchell is good, but she's not the great defender that a Brianna Tarrant or Julie O'Sullivan are. And Julie O'Sullivan and Brianna Tarrant are relatively shorter. So it'll be fascinating to see how do they handle Jack Tapai and Tara Bohannon. If they can keep the supply down, they've got a shot. I think this is a competitive game. I think the Suns just a little too much talent, but I think this is a cracking game on Saturday night. Cannot wait for this. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I tend to agree. It is going to be a cracking game, and probably I have the Gold Coast just slightly ahead on this one as well, despite not having Charlie Rowbottom. Like, she's now been ruled out because she's had ankle surgery. But even some of the other players around the middle there, Claudia Whitford, Lucy Single, playing brilliantly week in and week out. So yeah, I think Gold Coast will just have a little bit too much for the Swans. But as I said earlier, the Swans have nothing to lose here, and they're going to give it one hell of a crack. But potentially going with Gold Coast on this one as well.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating when this will be both forward lines could give the headaches to their defensive core. So it's going to be a fun one. We go to the two games in Melbourne. We're starting off with the elimination final down at GMHBA as we see the Cats host the Bombers. The Bombers go down the highway to Geelong. Can they get a win? Your thoughts on this one, and who do you like?
This is going to be really close, and this can go either way as well. I think with Geelong at home, I'm possibly leaning just on the Cats side a little bit, particularly given that they got so close last year, and they'll want to go one better in their final game. And just with that firepower up front, we know Essendon are efficient up front, but there's so many targets and so many danger players for the Cats up front now. The likes of Aisling Maloney and Chloe Shear. And Chloe Shear could be a key factor actually, because she's played outstanding this season, but she's been less prominent against the better teams. So now it's the final, and it's all on the line here. It'll be interesting to see how Chloe Shear goes. But again, Essendon are going to be very happy to be there, and they're not just going to go down the road making up the numbers, and they have the potential and the players, the likes of Bonnie Toogood, Maddie Perspakis. They have the star quality players that can turn this over as well. But I think it's a battle of the Perspakis sisters, and I think it's going to go Georgie's way and the Cats' way on this one.
Yeah, I think when it comes to it, there's more weapons on the Geelong side, which is scary to think because for the longest time they were the defensive team that would win an 8-6 game. But I think Geelong's defensive structure is going to be able to kind of quell Bonnie Toogood. I'm not sure if Essendon's defensive structure can quell the three-headed monster of Maloney, Jackie Perry, and Chloe Shear, and you throw in the push forward of Georgie Prasparkas, Nina Morrison, and Amy McDonald against a Maddie Prasparkas. I think there's just too much firepower for the Cats, but I agree with you. I think Essendon is up to their eyeballs in this one. And last but not least, in the first round, sees Melbourne host North Melbourne. Can North Melbourne end the hoodoo, or can the D's get their premiership defense on track right off the bat?
Oh, I think, of all the teams, this is probably the one that North didn't want to play in the first round of the finals. And if results had gone the way we expected, they probably wouldn't be playing them. But I think it's going to be close. I think Melbourne are going to get over the line in a close game. They're going to bounce back from that win last weekend, and they're going to want to get straight back into a preliminary final as the defending champions. As I say, that hex at this stage is almost over at Melbourne, but they've righted all the wrongs from last season in terms of what they needed to do to beat Melbourne. But at the same time, if you just go back 2 rounds to round 8, Melbourne were comfortable enough in beating North by 23 points, I think. So I think it could go anyway on the day, but I think Melbourne are going to progress on this one again in a close game.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I just think Melbourne has got the defensive ability to be able to handle the three talls with Melbourne, and Melbourne is one of the few midfield that's got the depth and the skill ability to be able to match a Garner, a Riddell, and a Bruton. So I think Melbourne win this one. I still think this is close. I think North Melbourne's class with Emma Carney and some of the ability that they have, they're going to be in this. I think every single one of these games could be under 10 if things go correctly. So we'll jump to the next round with our results that we had. We'll see Gold Coast play Brisbane at Brisbane, most likely at Springers, in the first semifinal, and it will see Geelong v North Melbourne. So we'll start with the interstate in the Queensland Cup, the Q clash between Gold Coast and Brisbane. Who moves on to the preliminary final, Brisbane or Gold Coast?
Well, I think it's Brisbane. Gold Coast have improved considerably if they get to this game, but they've never beaten Brisbane in all the Q clashes so far. The winning margin this season was substantially less than last season for the Lions, so showing improvement for the Gold Coast. And we know they've improved across the season, and we know there's a lot more structure to how they move the ball. But I think Lions are going to win that one and get themselves into preliminary final.
Yeah, this is one of those. Gold Coast will get the win, but I think Brisbane has just been too good, and Brisbane has done really, really well in Q classes. I think Brisbane just too good in this one. And a fascinating one as we see North Melbourne host Geelong in the other semifinal. I think North Melbourne's height and ability is going to be just a little bit too much for the Cats. Again, the Cats midfield. But when it comes to it defensively, I think North Melbourne has played really, really well. I think they'll be just a little bit too good for the Cats. I have North Melbourne moving on to the preliminary final. Who do you have?
Yeah, I agree on that one, Johnny. I think if this fixture transpires, we mentioned North Melbourne beat Geelong by just a few points in last year's final. Both teams have improved substantially, but I think North will just have too much for Geelong here across between the tall forwards and the midfield, Ash Riddell, Jazzy Gardner combination. But this is the one that Geelong will want to win if they get to this fixture to make up the rights or right the wrongs of last season. But I agree. I think Kangaroos into the preliminary from this one.
All right, so that would then mean that the North Melbourne Rouge would cross over and play Adelaide in the first preliminary, and we would see Melbourne play Brisbane in a rematch of the other preliminary final. We'll start off, Adelaide would host North Melbourne over at Norwood Oval. I think Adelaide win this one again. Adelaide's ability to beat North Melbourne again. North Melbourne's continued struggles against the top tier teams, I think, again rear its ugly head, especially on the road. Even though you would think a skinny ground would be perfect for North with their size, but I just think Adelaide play Norwood Oval way too well. Crows get into another grand final.
Yes, agreed. I think this is the game that North will want to play because they came so close against the Crows a couple of rounds back in round 9, but move it to a preliminary final, move it to Norwood Oval, and I think the Crows are going to march into that grand final. It's going to be a great game. Looking at these fixtures, if this is how it transpires, they're going to be absolutely brilliant games. But I think Crows are into another grand final from that fixture.
All right, and then the other one, the rematch of the previous year's grand final sees Brisbane come down to Victoria, most likely to Icon Park, to play Melbourne I gotta ask, does Brisbane get revenge after last year's grand final loss, or does Melbourne get into another grand final to face Adelaide?
I think Brisbane have had their revenge last weekend, and that's potentially going to come back to haunt them. Are you going to beat Melbourne in twice in the space of 3 or 4 weeks? Possibly, but it's going to be a challenge, and I think Melbourne are going to get back into that grand final and defend their title in a preliminary final down in Icon Park, if that's where it's on. Brisbane, the one thing is that Brisbane know how to beat Melbourne because they've done it. And it's 4 quarters of absolutely relentless pressure from first ball up to final siren. But what we've seen this season is that Brisbane struggle on occasion with that consistency, and that's led to a couple of those hiccup results. But they will be looking for revenge. I think they've got the revenge in round 10, and I see the Demons marching back into the grand final.
This is the one that scares me if I'm Melbourne, because Brisbane will be red hot after coming off of two game wins, where Melbourne will have a little bit of the rust with that gap week of the semifinals. It's the only thing that concerns me sometimes with the way the schedule is because sometimes a team that plays really, really well want to continue to play. So that bye week sometimes can burn them. But I think this is one of those Brisbane style. They're going to run out of steam. And I think Melbourne is consistent enough. They'll let Brisbane run their legs out. They'll have too much for him in the fourth quarter. I agree with you. D's, Crows, grand final. We jump to the granny, Norwood Oval, Adelaide hosting Melbourne. Does Melbourne spoil the party and get their second in a row and be the first ever back-to-back premiers, or do the Crows hoist the cup for the 4th time in AFLW history?
Well, this would be an incredible game, as you say. Two of absolute powerhouses. It's really tricky to call it. Having it in Norwood, does that swing it slightly towards Adelaide? It's hard to know what players are available. Will Melbourne have Paxi Paxman back and be at full strength? We saw Taylor Harris come back from missing 3 games at the weekend, and she was absolutely flying and taking a scream of remark. So if they're both at their strongest, it's going to be an absolute belter of a game. But who's to bet against Adelaide Crows winning their 4th premiership? It would be some achievement. But if there's one team that can do it in a grand final, it's going to be Melbourne. So absolutely intriguing on this one.
Yeah, this one's going to be absolutely fascinating. I actually think Norwood Oval actually will help Melbourne a lot in this one, and I worry that Adelaide will go through, get to the grand final, and this is one of those situations. Melbourne will have all the pressure off of them. The pressure will be on Adelaide to win again at home, and I have the D's going back to back. I think that loss by Brisbane is the perfect elixir for a D's team to come out absolutely steaming mad and to fly through this finals. The D's are one of the few teams that give the Crows headaches. I know the Crows beat them earlier in the year, but the same thing happened last year. Brisbane went to Casey, and then in the grand final, Melbourne went on the road and won a grand final. Melbourne style can go on the road, even at Norwood. I like the D's in this one. I just think their depth is just a little bit better than the Crows in the long run. It'll be an absolutely magnificent grand final. If that's the grand final, it's going to be amazing. If Brisbane's in the grand final, it's going to be amazing. There is no bad matchups in this. I cannot wait for it. That is going to do it. OMG. I don't want the season to end. It's been so magnificent, but we get some magnificent footy in this last month. I cannot wait. So that is going to do it for our episode. Mike, thank you again so much for staying up late and having a chat with me. It's been fantastic to talk women's footy. And again, I thank you, sir, for bringing over some of the magnificent players from Ireland. They have been a wonder to watch, and you are doing yeoman's work over there, and we genuinely appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Johnny. A pleasure to chat to you as always, and looking forward to seeing how the next few weeks pan out.
It'll be fantastic. So that is going to do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals. Again, be back. We will cover the finals weeks. Remember, we will cover next week and then take an off week after the semifinals and come back just after the prelims to cover the grand final, do a grand final review before we end the AFLW season on a high. Keep track of it. Remember, off-season supporter series will also be coming in over the non-footy season months. So keep an eye on it. That'll do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposal. We'll be back again very, very soon.